taking a look at the Rangers bullpen, what they did well this year, what they didn't do well, some free agent options, and some actual Rangers news that's happening now. All that and more on this episode of Locked On Rangers. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Rangers, your daily Texas Rangers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are locked onto the Texas Rangers. I'm Bryce Patrick, a cripplingly addicted Texas Rangers fan since 2010, the founder and host for all 4 seasons of this Locked On Rangers podcast. Today is Friday, November 4th, and we have, at most, 2 games left in the Major League Baseball season, I should say. Thank you all so much for making Locked On Rangers your first listen every single day. If you're not already, you can follow me on Twitter at Bryce Patrick. You can follow the show at Locked On Rangers and subscribe on YouTube, where the best way you can help grow the show is to comment any single thing below. Also, while we're talking about my Twitter, I tweeted at some point today. I'm going to go pin it onto my profile. Also retweet it to at Locked On Rangers, doing a poll asking for mailbag questions. You can either respond to them on Twitter, or if you watch on YouTube, you can leave them in the comments here on, or really any episode. So Monday's episode will be a mailbag question. Before we get to that, today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, it's where the game starts. Now, we have some good news, some bad news, and some interesting news to start off this episode. We'll go ahead and start with the bad news, get that nonsense out of the way first. This was reported by Kennedy Landry of MLB.com. Rangers prospect Aaron Zavala suffered a torn UCL in the Arizona Fall League. He had successful surgery performed by Dr. Keith Meister, one of the best in my opinion and in baseball's opinion, but was not a full reconstruction. He should return to the field by mid-May or early June. That is a huge freaking bummer. He had a fantastic season. I got to see him in person in Frisco this year. Absolutely loved what I saw at the plate. I really do think he's probably going to end up as the Rangers left fielder of the future. This injury is a huge bummer. While I don't think he was going to break camp with the Rangers, I do think he was probably going to start in Double-A, wouldn't be there too long, would see Triple-A. And I think had he been healthy all season, he probably could have seen maybe a little bit of a cup of coffee at the end of the year in September, but I don't think that's possible on the timeline for him at this point if he's coming back mid-May, early June. The good news is with hitters, this is not one of the injuries that's as concerning. With pitchers, a torn UCL obviously means Tommy John, which means they're going to miss like a year to 18 months or so, and it's going to be, another 6 to 12 months before they're fully themselves. With hitters, the elbow injuries aren't nearly as concerning. I mean, they're not great. Obviously, he's going to be out for a while, but it's more the hands, forearm, hands and wrist area, and also the shoulders. The elbow to forearm area, as you're seeing on YouTube, so I'm making apparently suggestive gestures, is less worrisome for the long term. So he is going to be out for a little while, but I think he should be fine when he comes back. Doesn't detract from an excellent season. It does make me wonder about why he was in the Arizona Fall League to start. He was healthy all season. He got as many reps as the Rangers needed. My thought is that maybe the Rangers were looking at him and Trevor Hauver were both in there, and it confused me. Dustin Harris not being in there, I think they were both waiting to be a Dustin Harris injury replacement, and Dustin Harris's injury didn't heal fast enough, so both those guys just got some extra reps there. Luis and Acuna, I kind of get them wanting to get an extended look at, but I think all those guys, they wanted to see, all right, if they did push them up to the big leagues next year, how ready would they be at that? Get a little bit more of an in-depth look at those guys, but Luis Acuna was their number one priority player, so he is playing a whole lot more than Zavala or Hauver were. I mean, Zavala played in 8 games. Maybe he got hurt early, and that's why he only played in so few games, but that was really, really frustrating news to find out. Best of luck to Aaron Zavala in the recovery. Glad the surgery went well. just a real freaking bummer. But there is some good news about the Arizona Fall League. They have released their rosters for the Fall Stars game. Congratulations to Luis Angel Acuna and left-handed reliever Grant Wolfram. Both of those guys are headed to the American League roster for the Sunday Fall Star League Fall Stars game, which will be in Sloan Park in Mesa. Really great season for Acuna. Also, the Rangers had another player get selected. Kumar Rocker was selected to the roster. He is not going to participate, I think, because of the innings limit. He ended his Fall Star professional at the minor league level debut with a 3.38 ERA, held hitters to a 2.11 opposing batting average, 13 strikeouts, 5 starts, 10 and 2/3 innings. There were quite a few walks and some other stuff there. Some new video from his later starts has been released. He is using his leg just a little bit more, so it is less concerning. If you haven't listened to the episode with my buddy Grant Schiller, the former college pitching coach, the guy who knows a whole lot more about pitching than I do, he had some really good points about why he was super concerned about the new delivery from Kumar Rocker. Some of those worries have been, calmed down just a little bit with the most recent video. Still a little bit of cause for alarm, but again, there are a lot of positive developments. He is out there and pitching and striking some really good hitters out. So that was encouraging stuff. We'll see where he starts next year, how much of a leash is on him, and what his delivery even looks like next year. There's a lot of work to be done, but obviously the talent there's a lot to dream on there with Kumar Rocker, and it's nice to see him just get on the hill at some point. So there is one last bit of news before we get into looking at this bullpen. This was reported by Ken Rosenthal of The Athletic on November 3rd, whatever day that was. I think that was Thursday, yesterday at 12:54 p.m. This is a tweet from him. Quote, sources within the industry continue to link former Royals GM Dayton Moore to the Rangers. Texas GM Chris Young finished his pitching career with Moore's Royals from 2015 to 2017, end quote. I don't know. I'm curious. I'm curious as to why this is happening. I mean, I get it, and I have a lot of thoughts, and a lot of thoughts that pertain to Jon Daniels, and we're gonna get into those in just a minute. But first, this episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline.net is your number one source for betting football and the start of the new basketball season. Find all the latest player developments, team matchups, news, podcasts, and in-depth analysis on every single game. And as always, BetOnline is your continued source for all your sports wagering information with live betting and up-to-the-minute scores for every sport out there. The fastest and easiest way to check in on all of your favorite games and events, including the final 1 or 2 games of the World Series going down Saturday and Sunday, MMA, boxing, and golf. If you're feeling like the Phillies are a team of destiny, they have got their best starters in game 6 and 7. I believe it is going to be maybe a longer Ranger Suarez appearance in a piggyback relief type of role. We'll see how that looks. Aaron Nola is probably going to pitch game 7. If there is a game 7, should be a fun series, been back and forth. But if you want to make some wagers on it, head to BetOnline, because that's where the game starts. Now, the Rangers are looking at Royals GM Dayton Moore, who did build a team that went to the World Series twice, and unlike the Rangers, did win one of those 2 back-to-back series, but really flamed out quite a bit after that World Series, which, if it were me, it's easy to say, sitting from way over here, that, if the Rangers just completely tanked into mediocrity after winning in 2011, I wouldn't have cared as much. It would have been fine. A lot of smoke and mirrors, it felt like, on that team, and, theoretically he has built good farm systems, but like the Rangers, he has been pretty behind the times, behind the curve. And I think that's one of the things that, as much as I like Jon Daniels, that he really fell away from and did not do a great job of. The drafting and development was not up to par. He made some really good trades. He made some pretty good free agent acquisitions. But for the most part, the Rangers play development has not produced stars. They have not produced multiple stars, and they have not produced even decent starting pitching. for the vast majority of Jon Daniels' tenure. And, the Royals are kind of in a weird spot right now, and they don't have a good team. They have some young core players that are fine, but for the most part, it is a really, really weird mismatch of players. They've got Brady Singer, who is a really quality starting young pitcher, but they have not done a great job of developing these guys who have been top prospects and making them into stars. I mean, even guys like Bobby Witt, who had a really not ideal first season. He was fine, not great, not star, and I think he still will be just fine. I think it take a whole lot to make him a not great player. I mean, he had a .9 WAR season this year at shortstop, which was kind of wild. Had a really weird roster, but I do know why they're bringing him in. They're bringing him in because they need, a veteran presence. Old Chris Young hasn't been a GM for a long time. He hasn't worked in a front office for a very long time. I think it's been, 2-ish years? Maybe 2.5? Maybe it's 3 years? I don't remember exactly when he was hired, but I know it was in December. I think it was just a few years back. But they need a veteran presence, a guy who has been there and done that, knows what it's like to generally run a team, to kind of give him some assistance. I don't think that Moore is going to be the guy in charge. Definitely not going to be hired over Chris Young's head. But they had a guy like that. It's weird. They had someone who had been a GM since 2006, and he kind of knew this organization pretty well. And the Rangers just decided to fire him, pretty much to prove a point. And they still let the guy who was his handpicked successor stay in his role, which means that they weren't unhappy with the general direction. They just wanted to prove a point. That's why they fired Jon Daniels. And firing your manager, okay, I get, that's look, I'm pissed, I'm an owner, and I want to insert my influence here, and, that's your right. And it doesn't make your team better, but it's your right to do as an owner, and it sucks. And, but the whole thought was, his whole reasoning, his whole explanation, he actually went in front of the press and actually spoke, which doesn't happen a whole freaking lot, was, Chris Young needs to have his own runway to lead up to the offseason. He needs to be the one that's in charge and doing everything. Well, if you're bringing in another guy to show him the ropes of how to lead up to this offseason, and this is a very, very, very critical offseason because the hammer's down, the gauntlet is laid. It's make the freaking playoffs in 2023, or there's going to be some major changes. Chris Young is probably going to be fired next year after a very, very short tenure in charge if the Rangers don't make the playoffs next year. Because what's it going to do? Fire Bruce Bochy after year one? No, it's not going to be Bruce Bochy's fault, and it might be a little bit Chris Young's fault. But unless he shows out a whole bunch of money, the Rangers, the hardest part of a rebuild is not, figuring out how to suck. It's not, figuring out how to, part of it, a big part of it is drafting the right players once you do suck and do start getting those high picks, which the Rangers will have a decently high pick this year. I believe it's got to be in the top 10. It's not going to be in that lottery for the number 1 overall pick. Which again is stupid because number 1 overall picks are such a freaking crapshoot in this sport, even more so than in the other sports. But I digress. That's a conversation for another day. But you knew that you needed somebody who has done that, been there, done that, pulled out of being bad, pulled out of the rebuild, figured out how to go from the, we're scrappy, we have some young talent, we are on the up and up, to we are actual contenders, legit, verified, here, and know what it takes to make that step. Because that is the hardest part of a rebuild. It's going from scrappy underdog team with some young talent to this is a fearsome team that is going to contend for a championship. And Jon Daniels has built that. One of the few times the Rangers have done that. They did it in the 90s with Tom Grieve there, and they did it in the 2010s with Jon Daniels in charge. And so it just, again, shows that firing Jon Daniels was just to make a statement and premature and actually might end up hurting the team. I mean, you bring this guy who, again, has also had the same struggles with whatever frustrations you have there are some very genuine, reasonable frustrations that you can have with Jon Daniels that I have myself, and some things that he definitely fell short on. But experience was not one of them, and figuring out how to take a team from the tank to contention is something that he has done before and done in this specific place. So it just kind of aggravates all of those frustrations all over again. But theoretically, I was going to talk about the bullpen this episode. We're already more than halfway through, and I have not brought up the bullpen just yet. So let's get into that, what the Rangers did well in their bullpen and the expectations for next year, and maybe some outside or prospect help that could help them along the way next year in their bullpen. But first, this word from our sponsors. So the Rangers had an up and down pen. At the beginning of the year, it felt like, okay, this is going to be a really, really terrible bullpen. This is not going to be a bullpen that can contend, and it's going to be a bullpen that's overworked because the starting rotation is just not great. And, well, part of those were true. The rotation was not great, was not able to go deep into games, did have some injury issues, and was not able to let this bullpen rest for the most part. But we did get some really great things out of this season, out of my own concerns and well-earned skepticism about the guys who ended up being the two best relievers on this team, Brock Burke and Matt Moore. They were absolutely fantastic. When they signed Matt Moore, I thought, oh, good, great. Here comes another round of the Matt Moore treatment. Oh, he's got a new curveball. He's going to be a completely different pitcher than he has been for the last half decade or almost decade. Sure, I totally believe it. This time, Lucy Liu won't pull the football out from under me, and me, Charlie Brown's going to be able to kick it and not fall on my back and scream in pain. No, I'm totally willing. Well, you know what? Lucy did hold the football down, and the new curveball did make Matt Moore excellent. Granted, he still did walk everybody and their sister and their dog, but when he was throwing balls in the strike zone and when hitters were swinging at it, they were not doing a whole lot of damage. He was in the top 10% of baseball in the barrel percentage, hard hit percentage, expected slugging, and batting average. He was fantastic at that. The average exit velocity was in the 69th percentile, which was pretty darn good. The fastball spin rate was fantastic. The curveball spin wasn't great, but it was good enough. The newly reformed curveball was very, very effective. The changeup was used effectively, and the fastball has been there. It's been good, but it's been pretty much his only pitch. And having an effective curveball and a fine changeup, a nice little change of pace, being a three-pitch pitcher in the bullpen and being able to go multiple innings in big spots and come up big was hugely effective for the Rangers, and I was completely wrong. One thing I was not wrong about is the Rangers probably should have traded him at the deadline and wanted this extra time, this exclusive time to negotiate with their free agents. I'm thinking it's just through the end of the regular season. Maybe it's a couple weeks after the World Series ends that they can have exclusive negotiating time with Matt Moore and Martin Perez, neither of whom have I heard anything about the contract discussions and how they're doing. And this is the whole point of you not trading these guys, is we want to retain them. We want to, bring them back and have the exclusive negotiating window, or theoretically exclusive. I'm sure there's plenty of tampering that's going on of GMs, just texting theoretically with agents of, oh, if this guy was, if we were interested in this guy, not that we are, if we were interested in a player like this, hypothetically, who is the hypothetical is exactly like your client, you know who we're talking about, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. But the Rangers have not gotten that done yet. I'm hoping they will. I'll go and research for next week when I do a little bit more in-depth looks at what the Rangers need in free agency, of how long that exclusive negotiating window is for the Rangers to lock down a Martin Perez and or Matt Moore extension. But anyway, Matt Moore was fantastic. The Rangers want to bring him back. He was great in a multi-inning reliever role. The Rangers had quite a few effective lefties in their bullpen in those multi-inning reliever roles. Taylor Hearn, once he did transition to the bullpen, was absolutely electric. The fastball was fantastic, was able to go those multiple innings, ended up being a mainly fastball, slider, changeup guy, kind of went away from the cutter, only threw that 1% of the time this year, threw the fastball 62% of the time, and the fastball velo jumped way back up there to where it was when he was a primary reliever. It was absolutely nasty stuff, and I really, really loved what I saw from him. Brock Burke was the other guy who I was completely wrong about. I kind of wrote him off completely after last season when he had the shoulder injury and came back and was just absolutely completely lit up at AAA. I didn't think this guy was going to be a contributor on a Major League roster, let alone the Rangers. But I am so glad to be proven wrong. I don't know if the Rangers are going to consider moving him to a starting role. He was a starter coming up. He was a starter, I believe, last year. And this year they're like, all right, well, the shoulder surgery was rough, and coming back from that was pretty tough. So we're going to put you in a relief role. He was a multi-inning reliever, had the most scoreless 2+ inning relief outings of any AL reliever, which was fantastic. He ended the year with an ERA under 2 of 197, was around like 150. It got a little bit rough towards the end of the season and wasn't quite as stellar as he was in the first half, but in the first half he was just absolutely unhittable. And even in the second half he was getting, quote unquote, blown up. It really wasn't that bad. He had a 3.06 ERA in 35 and a third second half innings. In the first half, he had a 1.15 ERA in 30 games and 47 innings. He also had 49 strikeouts at that time. Did not allow a lot of walks, only 11 in those 47 innings, and 3 home runs as well. Got bit a little bit more by the home run ball in the second half. 6 homers in 35 innings, but still fantastic strikeout stuff, fantastic command of his stuff, and the Rangers were able to go to him in a pinch. I would like to see him stay in the bullpen next year. I think it's just a safer bet. I would love to see him be a starter and be effective. I think of that trifecta that the Rangers had of white guys who were left-handed who were starters. I think he had the highest ceiling of them, even if you include Taylor Hearn in that grouping of 4 that included such greats as Colby Allard and whom I can't remember. Someone's screaming at me who the other reliever was, who the Rangers parted ways with, who I think ended up with the Giants and was also not great there. But I think of those 4, Brock Burke had the highest ceiling. I thought he was most likely to end up as a number 3 starter with his ceiling, some great fastball spin rate, and pretty good changeup and some effective off-speed stuff. But he was excellent. His extension was in the 94th percentile, and as a guy who was 6'4", that fastball, even though it was only averaging 95 miles an hour, I say only averaging 95 miles an hour, like that's a bad thing. When you're 6'4", and your extension is that great, you're getting that much further down the hill. The fastball is like right on top of you by the time it's already out of his hand, which is fantastic. His strikeout and his walk rate were both in the top half of baseball. Same with his fastball spin rate in the top half of baseball. He was just incredibly effective this year, and that was a huge, huge bonus for the Rangers. They also got some some core relievers back after missing a couple years due to injury. Jose Leclerc and Jonathan Hernandez were absolutely fantastic. Jose Leclerc's fastball spin rate remains the best in baseball, literally 100th percentile, and the velocity is averaging 97 miles an hour while being the fastest spinning fastball in all of baseball. He's also got, it's listed as a slider, which is his cut changeup. He's also, I don't know how they label his pitches, because he's got the weirdest repertoire of any pitcher I've ever seen, and I freaking love it. It's so effective, and I hate how it often gets misclassified, because it's not a cutter, it's not a slider, it's a cut changeup, but I think he's also got a slider that might be the one that's listed as a cutter, and the circle changeup. So he's got 2 different types of changeups that are just so effective. He is in literally the 1st percentile of extension. Just a little fun, interesting little fact there. But he was just so effective when the Rangers needed him. Kind of took a while for him to find himself. Same with Jonathan Hernandez. It took him longer to get back to the big leagues. The rehab stint kept taking longer and longer and longer. I think it was about a month after we initially expected him to be up. But, I mean, we saw Jose Leclerc get called up, and maybe he wasn't quite ready. He wasn't really himself when he first got up. But both these guys found their form. I mean, Jonathan Hernandez with his incredibly fast fastball in the top 3% of fastballs in terms of velocity. The season had a 2.93 ERA, only allowed the 1 home run, which I thought was going to be to Aaron Judge to break that streak of no homers given up. But he was still incredibly effective in a late inning relief role. He's obviously going to be a big part of the Rangers bullpen next year. Same with, I think, Taylor Hearn, Leclerc, Burke, and we'll see about these other guys. Dennis Santana, I haven't quite made my mind up on him. I think part of it was him being overworked, and then he got a prolonged break, had an IL stint, came back, and was still lit up in the second half of the season. He was incredibly effective in the first half, but the Rangers used him so much that he kind of got burnt out. Same thing with Brett Martin as well. John King had some moments that were good, but I do think eventually we're going to see Spencer Howard as a part of this pen, and Joe Barlow I think will be maybe towards the the front end of the bullpen, because not the back end. Whatever is coming in the lower to medium leverage situations, but I do still think that he can be pretty effective in that. It's frustrating to see him lose his closing job, but again, I think there was a little bit of smoke and mirrors to that. Lost some of his strikeout stuff, only 7.2 Ks per 9 and 3.3 walks per 9, which is not the ratio that you're ideally looking for a guy who is your closer. But still, I do think he can be a pretty darn high quality reliever, and if he is your fourth or fifth best reliever, then you got yourself a pretty darn good bullpen. If you're looking at some free agent options, I don't think the Rangers are going to be spending their money here. There are definitely a lot of high money relievers if the Rangers do want to throw some money that way. There is Edwin Diaz coming off a fantastic season, Craig Kimbrell, Kenley Jansen. I don't know how likely those guys are. Taylor Rogers, who kind of imploded with the San Diego Padres, if the Rangers wanted to go that route, or a reunion with Rafael Montero, who was with the Astros this year and had a really, really great 2020 season. The Rangers then traded him to Seattle, who then traded him to Houston. So he has been all around the AL West, or maybe he signs with the Angels, then gets traded to the A's or something like that. I don't know. Maybe something crazy. But I think if you're looking for a free agent option, I think it would just be a singular one free agent option. If you do let Matt Moore go, then maybe you go and get yourself a Rafael Montero as a treat. Or if you're looking at some internal options, I think Yuri Rodriguez is definitely going to be a guy who pushes to make the pen out of spring training. Did make his major league debut on the, I believe, final game of the season. Went a scoreless inning. Was really, really nice to see him do that. Nick Snyder is going to be hopefully pushing for a big league spot in the bullpen. Has some really nasty stuff. Got a little bit away from him. Had a pretty big walk problem in his short and major league stint and also in the minor leagues this year, but the raw stuff is really darn nice. And one more guy, I think maybe Zach Kent ends up in kind of a Brock Burke type role in a multi-innings of relief. Come in, pitch 3 innings, get through the order one time, and still have some nasty stuff. I think they're going to try him for a starter as long as they can, and they should. But I do think eventually he might end up in the bullpen. But if he ends up sticking as a starter, maybe fighting for with Dane Dunning for that number 5 role in the rotation, that would be a really, really nice outcome for him, because of the Rangers pitching prospects, it was a rough season for them for the most part. I think he and Cole Reagans will definitely be fighting for one of those spots in the rotation. I'm hoping the Rangers get Perez and then 2 more starters, because I think that's what it'll take for this to be a legit playoff team. The Rangers have also talked about wanting to add 1 bat. Ownership, I should say, has apparently, according to Evan Grant, made it clear that he wants to add 1 bat. I think you'd rather just spend your money on 3 starting pitchers if you're including Martin Perez, who is still somehow not been offered or at least agreed to a contract extension just yet. That's got to be priority 1. Then go throw some crazy money, see if you can get one of those top tier guys in Kershaw, DeGrom, Rodon, one of them, and then a mid tier guy to kind of bolster out their rotation. But I think the bullpen is in good shape for next year. We saw what it looked like with Leclerc and Hernandez and Burke and a effective Matt Moore and Taylor Hearn. That is a really, really good combination for a darn good bullpen and a pretty darn adaptable bullpen, which I think would be very, very helpful for the Rangers and for any major league team hoping to contend for the playoffs. But that's going to do it for today's edition of Locked on Rangers. Like I said, I'll be back on Monday with a mailbag episode, so be sure to get those questions to me either in the comments here on YouTube or responding to my Twitter tweet that should be pinned to the top of my profile. But thanks again for making Locked on Rangers your first listen. For your second listen, go check out Locked on Sports Today, the biggest stories of the day, plus instant reactions, big game recaps, and the take of the day, available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you all so much for listening and subscribing, and until next time, don't forget to enjoy baseball.